Hey there, gentlemen.
Hey,
Hey,
good to see you,
Kevin, thanks for
Carolyn.
joining us today.
Yeah, glad to be here. I'm overwhelmed by your background, David. There's a lot going on there. Is
Yeah,
is that a suit of armor I see?
but that's not a real suit of armor. That's a virtual background. It's just one of these, John, you think it's going to come out at us at some point?
David, it couldn't be virtual because I've seen it move a few times.
Yeah, I was gonna say if it slowly starts moving, I solemnly swear I will not say anything. I
Yeah.
want to see how close it can get to David before he notices.
Oh well, let's get this show on the road, and when the promo's over, it may be in a different spot.
Welcome aboard Lifelines with David and John, your guide to charting the transformative course of crisis intervention and the game-changing 988 Lifeline.
Hey there, welcome back to Lifelines, the 988 podcast with David and John, where every call is a fresh start, coming to you from the heart of Atlanta and today rippling out across the nation to Salt Lake City, Utah. We're diving deep into the heartbeat of crisis, and we're unpacking the rich history and exploring the electrifying future of 988. I'm DC, and alongside me is the crisis maestro himself, Dr. John Draper. We've been in the crisis game long before it was the talk of the town. You can watch us on YouTube. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe, or tune in wherever you get your podcast fix. The show is brought to you today by Behavioral Health Link. And let me tell you, episode 13 is going to be epic. I met this young man last summer and was so intrigued by his clinical vision and the work that's being done in Utah. So Brooklyn, tell us a little bit about what you've learned about our guest so far.
Well, what I've learned about him is actually you did a really nice job giving us a sense of your background, mostly some of the things you like to do, Kevin, and a lot of them are things that I love to do, and I love Utah, so I feel like I should be hanging out with you there. But you love a lot of physical exercise. You like adventure. You like to hike. You like a lot of the same kind of music. It sounds like I like. You like to play a lot of music. You're a man of many interests, and I think this is going to be a very interesting episode.
Well, I certainly hope so. My wife might tell you that I have too many interests. So
As
I
long as
I
you
don't
play
know.
it in her, Kevin, I think she'll be okay.
Yeah.
So, and Kevin, but we're here primarily because of your professional role as the Director of Hospital and Crisis Services for the Huntsman Mental Health Institute with the University of Utah. Tell us just a little bit about that position.
Yeah, so I'm a social worker by background. I never thought that I would be a program administrator, never thought that I'd be involved in developing programs. I am a person who, as a young person, their life was changed by a social worker who helped me see light in a really dark time. And like many of us that work in this field, we have our own very personal reasons for being a part of the work that we do. Right. And so uh, it was never my intent or you know, I didn't even have it as a possibility that I'd be where I am. But ultimately, the way that it's progressed over the years, that initial desire to help people to be able to shine that light on others the way I felt it shined on me by that first social worker that I worked with have led me on this process and pathway of really when you have the experience of being able to shine light, you want to be able to shine it on more and more people, and administrating programs and designing and developing programs that can create that light and can illuminate that pathway for other people. That's just been really the guiding process on this. So in my current role, I have been involved in all of our crisis access points for the University of Utah Health Hospital System Network. And more recently, I've been able to leverage that into helping to develop the Carolyn Gardner Mental Health Crisis Care Center project, which is a really ambitious and large scale project that's coming online next year to serve the people of Salt Lake County and the greater Intermountain West. So.
And we're going to talk more about that. But the passion you have for this work and the mission you have comes through loud and clear. So we're so excited you're here. One of the things we do to get started as we learn a little bit more about our guest is something we call what are you a super fan of? Now, you already told us in advance
Yeah, you
that you
did.
were a super fan of a football team.
Yeah.
Tell us that football team, because that one's off the table, John.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't like the way that you did air quotes around football. I know what you,
It's
I know what you mean by it,
it's
and
a
I think
soccer team.
it's a soccer team. It's a soccer team. I for many years, my love of soccer really started not the way that most Americans that love soccer, started by playing it as a kid, right? I spent a couple of my formative late teen or early young adult years in Brazil, and
Uh-huh.
during the time that I was there was a World Cup that went on,
There
and
you go.
Brazil won the World Cup,
Uh,
and this sort of cultural religious experience, like I had never been involved in a sport thing that felt almost like it was a religious experience.
yeah.
It was a very sort of life changing thing. So I just kind of got in love, fell in love with international soccer through that channel. As the most of the world knows it, football, right? And that just kind of led me down this pathway to where I spend a lot of my free time watching soccer in various forms, and in particular, I spend a lot of time with the English Premier League, where I support the plucky underdog team, Everton Football Club.
So
Um,
Everton Football Club is off the table, John. But what we're going to do, Kevin, is we're going to take a shot. I want you to get in your mind something else you're a super fan of, very specifically like Everton. And
mhm.
John and I are going to take a blank sheet of paper, and we're just going to write down what we think. We're going to take a shot, and you tell us, was it what you had in mind, and if not, which was closest. John, are you
Okay.
ready? You got a blank sheet?
Yeah,
Okay.
I got one.
All right,
Here we
ready, John? On the count of three, 2, 1.
go.
Okay, I got it. You
Okay.
ready? Okay, 3, 2, 1. I say he's a super fan
David, how
of
did you
White
cross the
Stripe.
foot?
This is White Stripe, John, singing Seven Nation Army right there.
Is that right? That's
Oh
amazing.
my,
He
oh
just
my goodness.
in just in seconds, and that's that. Well, the White Stripes, for one, David, still they're not really around anymore. So,
But you
what
can
is?
still be a fan. Super
All
fan.
right,
What is yours, John?
all right. It's the Urban Lounge.
Oh, okay. So
It's a music club
David,
in Salt Lake City.
yours was a very, very, very good guess. You're celebrating. This is a two-part thing.
Okay.
Very good guess. I don't know if you know this, but in world football,
So,
uh,
the Army's
Seven Nation Army
Yeah,
is a song. It's an
yeah,
anthem. It
yeah,
shows up all the time. Fans of different clubs make up lyrics to it and sing it about their players.
yeah.
So good crossover. Um, the Urban Lounge, man. It's just
Oh,
a small local music venue. I actually have tickets to see somebody play there on Monday of next week.
John
It's
Draper.
just so hyper specific. I got to go with John on that one.
Yeah.
That's
Wow.
incredible.
So, who are you seeing on Monday?
So I am seeing a band called Pedro the Lion.
Is it a
That
local band?
it's not. No, it's not. He is, I believe, out of the Pacific Northwest is kind of where
I
he's
will check it
headquartered.
out. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Well,
Okay.
John Draper,
What's
nicely done. John, how did you get to the Urban Lounge?
Well, I knew you loved indie music, and you said
Mm,
local, and said,
mm,
what band? No, I'm not going to be able to guess that. But the joint, the joint, it's
yeah.
the place.
Way to go, John. All right, so we're getting to know Kevin a little bit. We're going to jump into this deeper, but John Draper, Brooklyn, tell us about our sponsor, Behavioral Health Link, before we get the show rolling today.
Happy to do that, David. The crisis care center facility that Kevin is going to be commandeering in 2025 is surely going to set a new standard for behavioral health crisis receiving facilities, not only in this country, but probably worldwide. But you don't have to wait to build your own state-of-the-art crisis receiving center to revolutionize how you manage coordinating crisis care for people who need a bed in a facility now. Now, with Behavioral Health Link's real-time bed registry software module, your care teams are going to be able to receive live updates on crisis bed availability, enabling immediate, informed decision-making for patient placement. It's not just a tool, it's a lifeline. ensuring that individuals in crisis can quickly find the care that they need. With features like detailed facility information and streamlined communication channels, the real-time bed registry software platform is your partner in delivering efficient, effective care solutions. For more information, just visit behavioralhealthlink.com. David?
Thank you, John. So, Kevin, we start each of our podcasts with a trivia question, an over-under. And I'm going to put on the screen for our audience the new crisis receiving center that is being developed in parallel to the one in Salt Lake City. But this is in Columbus, Ohio, that the McAdamus board is putting together. Kevin, I believe you visited Jonathan Thomas and team.
Yes, I was able to go and see that facility in progress last month, and it was a great experience. I felt a lot of validation of what we're doing, seeing that other groups that are out there kind of innovating the space are really aligned with,
Yeah,
Are
excuse
there
me, the direction that we're going.
than you are, Kevin, in construction? Where are they relative to you?
I think we're sort of neck and neck in terms of when we'll wrap up and start operations. So we're kind of tandem on this, I think.
Really
So,
exciting.
Kevin, when we met and you walked us through the clinical design and we visited the construction of the Salt Lake City site, of course, I immediately thought of Jonathan Thomas and the work they're doing and wanted to put you guys together. So, John, the trivia question is about throughput. It's about the flow of these crisis receiving centers. And language varies. We wrote, for those of us who are part of the development of the SAMHSA National Guidelines in 2020, we called them crisis receiving centers. I think Dr. Margie Balfour and the team at Connections might refer to them as emergency behavioral health crisis inpatient. Kevin, what's your language that you use for this same concept?
We have historically referred to it as crisis receiving centers. As we've tried to broaden the concept and really kind of innovate on the model, we've really landed on crisis care center.
So, John, there is some differences, and we'll get into them in these programs and more traditional crisis stabilization, crisis residential programs. But a vibrant crisis stabilization program in the United States might boast serving 500 to 1,000, even as many as 2,000 people in a year. Jonathan Thomas and the team at McAdamus with the Columbus Franklin County Crisis Care Center are projecting how many to be served in year one. And I'll let you ask a question or two if you want to try to get your head around some of the key data you might need to take a guess at that.
All right. So just to be clear, David, you said 500 out of 500. How many out of over what period of time?
So what I said was the traditional crisis stabilization program might serve between 500 and 1,000, even maybe as many as 2,000 in a year. What is Franklin County projecting they will serve in year one? And I'll let you ask a couple of questions if you want to get to some of the underlying data that you would need to know.
Yeah. Now I think they have somewhere in the neighborhood of 65. Those are the chairs, right?
They have 60 chairs in their 23-hour temporary observation and treatment,
Yeah, and they've got
sort of
got
the
beds
front
for.
end of that program.
They've also got some beds for longer stays.
They have 16 short-term inpatient. They're actually inpatient beds, but to serve that more crisis-oriented short-term crisis stay.
So again, those 60 some odd chairs are 23 hours typically. So they're going to turn over. Now we're not going to assume that all of them are going to be filled, but a good percentage of them are going to be filled every day. So I'm going to say, we'll say 50 a day.
Yeah.
Now that's the chairs alone. That's I mean, gosh, out of 30 some odd days, you're talking, 1,500 right there.
Right.
That's crazy. So then, you multiply that by 12. We're talking, 15,000 or something like that. Then we throw in the longer stay. So I would say somewhere in the neighborhood of 18,000.
18,000 is, John, you've been killing this. The logic you've been putting in week after week has been good. Kevin Curtis, now I know you were there and you may have even heard this figure, but is the correct answer higher or lower? And again, the two things I'll add is we are talking about year one, not year 10. They do project out through year 10. And the second thing, John didn't get into the average length of stay in the crisis inpatient, but I believe that's in the 5 to 7 day range. For us, we think 3 to 4 days, 2 to 4 days even, but I believe they're thinking 5 to 7. So 18,000, higher or lower for year one?
Oh, this is tough.
Yeah. John has cut that cake right down the middle. Which piece do you want?
Yeah. This group out there, they're very ambitious. They've got a lot of need out there in Columbus. I'm gonna say they are projecting uh, the inpatient is such a red herring because like the volume is all through the short term. I'm gonna say they're projecting
And all you have to
higher.
do, Kevin, is do over or under.
I'm gonna say that John is under what they're
Yeah.
projecting.
Yeah. And look, the typical program doing 500, 1,000, 2,000, 18,000 seems like an awful lot. And I think 18,000 is ambitious for this program, but they are projecting 21,000 in year one.
Yeah.
They're projecting 20,000 in the 60 recliners and 1,000 in the inpatient. Now they're still exploring a little bit how to operationalize those inpatient, but Kevin, it's a really impressive program. And John Draper, Brooklyn, dude, you have been the thoughtfulness of you making it hard on our guests the last 6 weeks in particular. Kevin, what are you projecting for year one in your crisis facility? And tell us about the capacity.
Yeah. So part of how I got to my guess was just looking at numbers from our pilot program where we're operating on a 12 chair. We're running at, no refusal, law enforcement drop-offs. Really, we've tried to tailor it to exactly the type of program that we're wanting this to be. And in that program, we're averaging, and we're 9 months into our pilot, we're averaging about 90% chair utilization of our 12 chairs. And that's just, and it probably started at 70% utilization average and then kind of grew. And we have not yet had a month where the utilization did not grow month to month.
Yeah.
Right. So that average is based on days where some days we're operating at 150% of our chair capacity and others we're at, 70. It's crisis. It comes when it comes, and some days are super busy, whatever. So we are going to be operating in our new space at a 30 chair capacity. The Salt Lake County, Salt Lake metropolitan area is a little bit smaller than the Columbus area.
Right.
We're feeling pretty confident that our 30 chair capacity is a good kind of numerical fit for our population. But we anticipate in year one that we'll get up to that 90% capacity mark. So I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
going to be.
It's a smaller program, but operating similarly.
Yeah.
John, we will have Jonathan Thomas on in the weeks ahead, who is Kevin's contemporary. And I'm going to probably make the mistake again of doing what Kevin's adeptly avoided. Is I said Columbus and Salt Lake are similar in size, and they're not. Columbus is one of the largest cities in Ohio, and so we want to make sure we give respect to Columbus. But Salt Lake, Kevin, so let's transition a little bit into your career path. And I want to get back to something you told earlier about a social worker in your life, but let's start with where you started your crisis career. I don't think you may have not even been a full-time employee yet. You were either a student or an employee. And I believe it was at the Urgent Psychiatric Center at the UPC in Central Phoenix.
Yeah, it was. So I did graduate school at Arizona State University, grew up in the Salt Lake area and went as far as the Phoenix metro area for grad school. So it was like a real adventurous journey for me. And yes, I ended up doing a first-year internship with Value Options, who at the time were running the urgent psychiatric care. And then after that first year, I ended up being hired on in what was sort of it was a role designed for a master's level social work clinician, but they were having so many challenges with getting those roles filled that they took a chance on a sort of almost master's level clinician, and so I worked in that urgent psychiatric care, for that last year of grad school, and that was my first exposure to the receiving center model and to really the crisis system in general. I was like many, one of those people that always thought you'll go to grad school, you'll come out, you'll have a private practice, you'll do therapy in an office, and that will be your. But I just very much became addicted to the crisis environment as the place that I wanted to operate. So
Mhm. That's very familiar to me. I had the same kind of experience, Kevin. I just wanted to be a therapist, and
mm,
the rest is history. But for you, it's that you weren't just a person who worked at the crisis care center, the receiving facility. You went from seeing a social worker to being one to eventually becoming a real leader, and now the leader at one of the premier receiving facilities in the nation. Tell me a little bit about that journey, and also what about that experience with the social worker has kind of stayed with you in terms of lessons learned and kind of care that you want to see happen in the facilities that you're overseeing.
yeah. So I'm trying to decide how deep to go into this. I don't know that anybody wants, like tears shed or anything.
Yeah,
But what I will say
please.
is I grew up in a family that didn't have a lot of resource and that was not particularly literate when it comes to emotional wellness, psychological wellness. Maybe an easy way to say it is when I first went to see a social worker, I didn't know what a social worker was, what they did. I didn't really have a good understanding of therapy. I was just an adolescent who was struggling, that uh, um, didn't know how I fit into the world. Had feelings of what is the point of being here? What does anything mean anything at all? And it's just exhausting to be alive, right? Um, and I didn't know that was a mental health condition. I didn't know that it was. I didn't have the language for it. So I don't necessarily know that I would even, looking back on it, think, oh, that was the best social worker or the most inspiring social worker. It was really, and I use this metaphor a lot. I was wandering around in a place that felt very dark. I didn't know what light was or what light felt like. Um, I didn't have the language for it, and I did not have any conception that this was an experience that other people around me might be having too. It just felt like this was a unique thing to me. And that experience of eventually seeing a social worker, it was very much like I walk into this office, and whether it was because he helped me see that other people were experiencing these things too and they were common, whether it was because there was a validation of that experience and a pathway towards tools to help manage that. It felt like I came in darkness and somebody shined a light on me, and so that's been very much a guiding metaphor for me in terms of how I want to be as first a social worker and therapist, but even more so as a administrator and a program administrator. How do I make the programs be built around that experience of warmth, light, and inclusiveness, so that anybody that is wandering around in that darkness sees a pathway towards light?
Warmth, light, inclusiveness. I think it's a great story, Kevin, and it also is a great segue into our good news. And normally, in good news, we reference a current development that John and I will expound on. But today we kind of push that back to you. The good news is the work that we're seeing in particular, in the Huntsman Mental Health Institute, but especially in this emerging Kim and Carolyn Gardner Mental Health Crisis Care Center, which is not only going to have this positive impact in Salt Lake City, but is going to ripple out an expectation of what a full 988 to mobile crisis to crisis receiving can look like. So can we, Kevin, punt to you and ask for an update on, John and I have had the opportunity to see the Huntsman's impact when they begin to invest politically and financially into something like cancer treatment and research. And now the Huntsman Mental Health Institute, the University of Utah, the work that you are all doing. How's it going, Kevin? And what's the latest?
Yeah, well, it's going fast, which is an exciting thing and also a scary thing. Um, we started with big ideas. I appreciate the shout out to the Huntsman family who have been such a huge part of making what we're doing possible, and I think have really created a blueprint for what can happen in other communities when public funding, private funding, community treatment providers, business community are all brought together towards doing something bigger. But we recently had the opportunity to tour some of the Huntsman family through the site and got some really great feedback of how much the expansiveness of their vision is captured in the progress of what this building is going to be. And because I'm a person that speaks in metaphor, one of the one of the things that David Huntsman really kind of picked up on was when we were designing the facility, the entry point was a conversation of great. It was a topic of great conversation. My experience with most mental health facilities is that they occur in the least wanted, darkest corner of the old building that nobody wants, right? And we were given the challenge of what if this were the world class facility? What would it look like? What would it feel like? And so one of the areas where this became a great topic of conversation was the entry point, the front door. And the designers came back with this like small little canopy, which was actually really a reasonable entry canopy.
Right.
But we kind of approached it.
Functional.
Yeah, it was functional. We approached it like from what I joke is like the more cowbell sort of perspective of like, could you make that a little bigger? And really, what we were trying to capture is like, we don't want anybody that rolls up to this building to have any confusion about where is the door, where is the entry point, is it hidden? Is it shrouded by shrubberies? It's you cannot mistake it. This is the entry point. This is the canopy. And David, to the side was like, you guys nailed that entry process. And you showed a rendering of what that front lobby looks like. We really light, warmth. These were kind of two of our guiding principles. The warm blanket. We want anybody that's walking through this facility to feel like they're being received as though they're being wrapped in a warm blanket. So. The construction is on track and on progress. We should be having this building turned over to us in December of this year. It's going to take us a couple of months to get moved in, to get our staff up to speed and trained and ready to go. And we are on target for patient care to start in March of 2025. So
fabulous.
That is
John,
great.
more cowbell, warm blanket.
Streamers,
You are
trumpets,
being
red carpet. Yes.
you are being received.
Mhm.
Yes.
The inviting nature of this, that this matters, that this is important,
Yeah.
as opposed to the message that comes across when the entryway is some combination of the old and dilapidated, more hospitally, or a lot of the kind of barriers of plexiglass and security keypads and all the kinds of things that suggest you're dangerous. Kevin, I love everything I'm hearing.
Yeah, you're welcome here as opposed to there's no room at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if I can, the one other quick thing I'd say about that was we worked with incredible design teams on this. We worked with Architecture Plus out of Troy, New York, and FFKR out of Salt Lake City, and they were great in that they had a good feeling of how much this space can help you meet those goals, but the process of really focusing on the space allowed us to really focus on, okay, from a programming and a care standpoint, how can we make that care be up to the level of what we're shooting for with the architecture
Right.
and design? And one key moment that came up really was around that idea of receiving, right? We were in the design process, and one of the architects said, okay, we've got some questions about the receiving area. And it created great confusion because there was the shipping and receiving area where the food stuff is delivered, and there was the observation space. And all of a sudden it made us think about, yeah, it's weird that we use this terminology for this. And I don't know about you folks, but I've toured a lot of receiving centers that are designed for crisis, and they feel a little bit more in the way that people are handled and treated, like a shipping dock, where it's all about moving people from space to space, right? When really we want to be a receiving center, like when a baby is born, the doctor goes into the receiving position, right. Receiving can be an impersonal, logistical thing that
Yeah.
happens in a dock, or it can be a care-oriented process. And so we've really kind of picked up on that metaphor as well. What does it mean to feel received? And how can we create an experience in every interaction of feeling received?
And maybe the term is closer to reception area.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin, we'll come back to these design elements because that was really what fascinated me most. But you talked about starting the program March 2025, but in actual fact, you have been staging and phasing the capacity and the model. Tell us about that process and what you've learned.
Yeah, well, so we first started doing receiving type work in about 2012. And it was really just kind of a function of Salt Lake County needed that resource, and we had an ability to do it, but it was never scaled or scoped to what our community needed. So we did it for many, many years at a 6-chair capacity, and we were never able to truly make it non-refusal. We were never able to really make it what we needed it to be. It almost became more defined around its exclusions than its inclusions in terms of who could receive care there. It was in the wrong place. It was just about as bad of a rollout as you could imagine for a receiving center. So um, I like to be honest and own that history as part of this process, because I think for communities that are considering investing in receiving centers, you don't have to start an astronomical scale. You can start smaller, and you can learn lessons about what works for your community, what you need, and those lessons and that foundation become the foundation for getting to where you need to be. So we have been able to, in that same 6-chair space, through the Salt Lake County Council came to us and said, we want you to expand that space. 2025 is too far away. We need more resource for our community. They brought it to council vote, and something happened that never happens. The Salt Lake County Council unanimously voted to fund the expansion of this program across bipartisan lines, and they gave us some funding to double the capacity of our space. But that change in scale allowed us to shift around our staffing models to be able to really build this into a true non-refusal, where really the only exclusions are, is the person conscious, is the person bleeding, okay, if not, they start with us. We'll own that triage if they need to be sent on to another facility, which happens less than 3% of the time in our model, which is great. We receive them here, so we've been getting a lot of experience with law enforcement drop-offs, EMS drop-offs. We've had a lot of just 24/7 walk-in traffic in this facility, so that the the thought of going into a 30-chair receiving center is not scary to us at all. We've got a confidence that our model is resilient. We know that we can run it at 150% capacity with the way we're staffed and situated. We're not inventing anything new when the new facility opens. We're scaling up something that's working and that we've got a good handle on.
Yeah,
So,
that's really helpful to hear, Kevin, because you were saying, there's obviously receiving facilities, and then there's no wrong door
mhm.
receiving facilities, the non-exclusionary ones like the one that you're operating. But that's a big shift. And you said we're not scared. We weren't scared of doing that, or didn't become scared. But for a lot of facilities, they are scared, or there's a number of barriers that stand in the way of them doing the right thing that you all are doing and other no wrong door facilities are doing. And I'm wondering, could you explain how you managed to address that culture change successfully, where there was no longer any fear of that, and now you're going to be scaling even larger? And I wonder if there's other challenges you anticipate that you're going to have to overcome with that as well.
Yeah, certainly. So it would not be true to say that there was no fear. There was in fact a great deal of fear, particularly in this transition from the 6 to 12 chairs, because that transition was built around. It was not a question of should we. It was this funding was tied to this has to be a no refusal facility. So really, we took. We had a little bit of time because there was going to have to be some construction where we were able to pull the core staff together and start having these conversations. And they really were oriented around not should we become no refusal, but we are becoming no refusal. What about that scares you? Okay. And that was able to be transitioned to a conversation about the best thing to fight fear is tools. So if these are the situations that scare you, what are the tools that you need to be able to not be scared? Some of those tools were adding in different staff members that were not presently part of the staffing mix so that we had the right type of people working in the facility. Some of it involved tools like making sure we had access to the right kind of medical screening to be able to, like when we talk about the idea of being a triage first model on the medical side, people were projecting that like 20% of people that would come through would have to be sent onto an emergency room. That was the level of fear-based thinking around that. And so we just said, okay, if that's the case, great. Let's make sure we have good tools for making those handoffs and those transitions happen smoothly, right? We don't think it will be that much, but let's kind of play that out and give you the tools. And then they're pleasantly surprised when they both have the tools and the number comes in more at like 3%. So you have to engage in the conversations. You have to listen to staff and understand what their fears are. You have to empower them in the problem solving and building the tools. But if you take it on and you make it a matter of how do we work together to be prepared to do that work, you don't eliminate the fear, but you create a sense of empowerment that it will be scary, but we're equipped to handle that. And then when you actually go into that process of piloting that no refusal, you start to have the data come in that then reinforces, oh, this is not as bad as we thought it was going to be. 20% becomes 3%. You can track the poor outlier outcomes, which do and will happen in these spaces, but you're able to contextualize them as extreme outliers and not the norm. And that's where we've got this 12-chair model operating no refusal, where now that fear is just not a part of the equation. That there are fears associated with it, like will we be able to find enough staff to get to that point, but we don't have fears about our model or whether we're able to deal with the stuff that walks through the door.
And what was fear is now sounds like a source of pride for you too.
And confidence and accomplishment. Yes. Totally.
Yeah. Kevin, we're going to transition to our interactive segment, but just a quick question before we do that. The 3% you are sending away for medical stabilization, what percentage of that 3% are then coming back into the program because they had their needs met medically or were stabilized?
Yeah, I don't want to make up statistics. I actually don't know that off the top of my head, but many of them do come back. The types of patients that are being sent out are ones that have either you get in, and through the interview process you learn that they took an overdose and then came in for treatment, or also people that have very, very significant benzodiazepine or alcohol use, where there are and histories of medically complicated detox, right? So a lot
Right.
of those people are coming back through. I just don't know from a statistics standpoint what percentage.
Okay. So, John and Kevin, our first interactive segment today, we have been talking about throughput and flow. So, I have a quiz for you guys on queuing theory and inventory management. So, I want you to think back to your focus on single lines versus multiple, arrival rates, traffic intensity, balking and reneging.
My grocery store bagging days, you mean?
I actually did start this trivia, and then I said that's just too boring. So instead went a different place. I did learn though that balking is you never get in the line in the first place, and reneging is you join the line and say, "I'm not waiting for this." So it was worthwhile. But I moved to a different place, and that is I'm a Starbucks fan, Kevin.
Yep.
And Starbucks is a unique business model that I thought we'd get into. So I've got some questions from Starbucks that Kevin and John, I'll look to you to, you'll say truth or myth, truth or false when I point at you. The first question, the name Starbucks is inspired by the first mate in Herman Melville's classic Moby Dick.
False.
Kevin?
I'm just going to say true to be a contrarian.
Yeah, it's true. They wanted to evoke the romance of the high seas and the tradition of early coffee makers, or coffee traders, actually. Okay, so let's get into the design. Starbucks uses a uniform design for all its stores worldwide and works to streamline and avoid local influence.
Oh, that's true.
That makes sense to me. I'm going to say true.
Yeah, and I would say true too, but I've been had the privilege of traveling in Asia, and they do a lot of modification to reflect the local community and culture. They incorporate local
There's
art.
that fancy one in Chicago too. That's like got 4 stories. That's right.
Exactly, John. So they do have a basic model, but they are working to incorporate the local influence. I would have never gotten that if I hadn't seen a couple of stores where they've done it. Number 3, Starbucks are designed to be welcoming, but they do discourage customers from staying long periods. True or false?
False.
False.
That's not true at all. From comfortable seating to Wi-Fi to power outlets, they focus on the acoustics, on the lighting. They want you to stay longer.
Back.
They want to be welcoming, Kevin. They want to be inviting, and then they want you to stay. Number 4, Starbucks offers incentives for customers who bring their own reusable cups.
Yes.
True.
I didn't know that, and I've gone every day for weeks at a time. They do offer discounts to reduce waste. How many cups have I wasted, John? I could have been taking in a reusable cup.
No kidding. That'll teach you.
Starbucks has not adopted mobile ordering because of a core focus on human-to-human interaction.
Oh no,
That's false.
they love
Thank
them.
God. I don't understand why people stand in those lines when you can now mobile order in the airport, Kevin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was that, John?
We like human interaction. I like the lines, sitting around wasting time. I love them.
Some Starbucks stores host community events and live performances, including indie bands.
I've never seen it, but I want to think that it's true somewhere. Let's say true.
Maybe in Seattle, perhaps, but I'm going to say false.
Yeah, I would have said false too, John, and I added on the indie bands. But yes, that's true. They absolutely have stores that host community events, Kevin. You're starting to see a theme here, though, and it's a similar one, Kevin, to it's about community, it's about local, it's about interaction, it's about not only welcoming, but stay. However, while Starbucks frequently uses wood in their internal designs, they actually avoid stone because it's believed to create a cold and unwelcoming atmosphere.
Is it true?
That makes sense. True.
My first stab at this question didn't sound true, but I ran it through ChatGPT a few times till it would persuade you. It's a myth. They're seeking warmth and authenticity back to local community. So
Mm,
wood, stone,
Um,
and local art. Local. They'll bring
mm,
in.
Perhaps here
Uh,
in New York, it's all stone.
yeah.
mm.
The Starbucks design philosophy imagines a third space where people relax between home and work. True or false?
True. True.
Ooh,
True. True.
yeah,
It's a strong statement for me. I still would have said false. It's true. That is the way they think about it, Kevin. You got
Hmm.
three places in your life: home,
yeah,
work,
Hmm.
and Starbucks.
yeah. They
Hmm.
want you to spend the night there.
Okay. Like In-N-Out Burger. Do you know In-N-Out Burger, Kevin?
I certainly do. Yep.
Like In-N-Out, Starbucks has a secret menu that was crafted by baristas and customers.
True.
True. Yep.
Again, I would have said false. It's true. How do we not know about the secret menu?
Yeah, yeah.
And finally, the pumpkin spice latte was first introduced over 20 years ago, but it finally saw sales wane in 2023 after one of the most successful runs of products for many years.
Oh,
I,
cool.
I think that's true. There's just been a lot of like backlash to the pumpkin spice. I'm a unapologetic lover of it, but
Yeah.
I I think it dropped off. There was some backlash to it.
I'm going to say
True.
John's right on this one.
Ah,
I thought I could get you with that one, Kevin. What they say is, no, it's still running
yeah.
strong.
yeah,
It's got and just like yourself, Kevin, part of that is because of a dedicated fan base.
Hmm.
yeah. My daughter ordered some just last October, so
Yeah.
I remember
So,
buying.
Kevin, before we get back into our interactive segments, any reflections on the original discussion you had about your welcoming to the reception area and these concepts?
Hmm.
That there's some overlap there.
Yeah, I'm kicking myself for getting the stone question wrong because we had lengthy conversations about sourcing local stone and what stones communicated warmth versus coldness. And our design has this right off of the giant more cowbell canopy. There's a giant stone tower with warm local stone. So, yeah, a lot of these conversations very much overlap with the way that we thought about and talked about the design of our facility.
Well, look,
Certainly.
I knew you two guys are two of the top in the world on this topic, so I worked hard to make these as challenging as possible. But look, your model of crisis center design, Kevin, is what drew me to your work. One of the phrases you used while we were there was reverse movie theater. You've seen different styles of setting these up, and you're constantly thinking about how do you balance safety, engagement, et cetera. Tell us about your model of design. Not we focused on the front end, but on the program itself and the day-to-day interactions of staff with each other and
Mhm.
with the guests.
Yeah, yeah. So we started by looking at a lot of facilities, and we saw a lot of those things that led to us making these realizations, like the reverse movie theater, which for the uninitiated, it's an experience you'll see in a lot of crisis receiving centers where they're set up where you have the folks that are receiving care in straight lines facing a window. Sometimes that window even has reflective surface on it so they can't see through it, staff on the other side watching them. It's a very dehumanizing, alienating experience. So we had the luxury of having space and budget to think about how would you do it better and different if you could. And so we wanted to make sure if we're serving 30 chairs, we don't want 30 chairs in a room. We want to be able to manage the experience of those people. And so we separated those out into three pods that are served by a central kind of care station area where you can staff them with a similar level of staff, but where you can create more home-like, more living room type environments.
Right.
You can create unique experiences that are flexible to the population being served on that day. So you can kind of separate people out by clinical need, acuity, whatever the situation requires. You have a lot of ability to have people have a good experience with receiving. We've had a lot of pressure from different areas to to think about, well, shouldn't you make that experience more private by creating more separation in those spaces? And there's always that balance between privacy and observation and safety, but also we feel like for many people in crisis, having a community-based experience is actually really helpful. Sometimes they learn coping from somebody else that's going through a similar experience. Sometimes they gain the benefit of perspective. I thought I was in crisis, but I'm here with people that are dealing with much more challenging issues. I think I've got it, right? And so in these kind of 10 chair pods, they're all designed around central meeting spaces where the intent is not you come and you sit in a chair. The intent is you come and you gather and you work with staff, you work with our peers, you work with each other towards crisis resolution. If you need the space, you can kind of go to your dedicated chair space, but it's all about community and the way these spaces are designed.
Kevin, earlier I was asking about how you became a leader. I've just been hearing it throughout this. I'm hearing thoughtfulness, innovation, vision, passion. I mean, all of those things I think really inform us as to what not only you become, but what you can help this center become. And I know you're really focused on just this next year. It's a big year. But humor me for a minute. I'm just going to push you out a little bit further into the future. Let's say 5 years from now, if there's going to be a headline in the local paper, in the Tribune, that says, this is a major achievement of the center that Kevin is running, what would you hope that headline is going to read? And tell us a little bit about how it happened.
My greatest aspiration for it is that it sets a new baseline standard. So that headline reads, local center becomes inspiration for new way of providing crisis care to those in mental health crisis, right? And I hope 5 years from now, we're looking at redesigning our programming, potentially improving the spaces because others have taken up that new floor challenge and are pushing the model even further.
When I imagine even 20 years from now, then, so just push it even further out there, 20 years from now, and the Tribune's writing a legacy. What do you think that headline is going to read?
The reverse movie theater is dead.
So, Kevin,
movie theaters, reverse or otherwise, they're gone.
Kevin, you started with access, no wrong door, and you ended with that experience for the individual in care. Love all of this. Let's go to our final interactive segment. And Kevin, you were in New York recently. You saw 4 Broadway musicals plays in 4 days in a row. We're going to end with a segment. What's the Broadway musical or Broadway play? And they all relate to mental health, substance use, or suicidal crises. I've got some hints if you and John can't come up with it. So the first one, in which musical does a teenager create a fictional friendship with a deceased classmate?
Oh, that's Dear Evan Hansen.
There you go. Good one. Good for you. Waving through a window, you will be found. So John, you live there, and Kevin beat you to the. Come on, John.
Yeah, I forgot that. Yes, classmate.
Right. Brooklyn will know this one, but let's see if Kevin can get 2 in a row here. Which Broadway musical is inspired by a famous singer-songwriter's confessional album and addresses addiction and depression?
Confessional album. Well, I don't know.
I'll give you a song.
Yeah.
I'll give you a song if you need it.
Yes.
Sure.
Give us a song.
You ought to know.
Oh, Jagged Little Pill.
There you go. Good one.
Yes.
Third one. This one's a little harder, I think. Which Broadway musical centers around a mother struggling with bipolar disorder and its impact on her family?
Next to Normal.
Oh my God, Kevin, you spoiled it.
Kevin goes to Broadway. I don't go to Broadway.
Yeah. Which Broadway musical tells the story of a young prince dealing with the loss of his father and his journey to reclaim his throne?
I believe that's Pippin. No? No?
Nope.
No? Oh.
This was, I thought you guys wouldn't get any of the first one. So this one is Can You Feel the Love Tonight?
Ah.
No. have
Well,
no.
no, that's
The Lion King.
the Lion King.
Uh, ah, ah. Yeah, you are a trickster,
I tricked.
David. I didn't know this about you.
Uh, which,
Okay,
which Broadway musical features struggling artists in New York City and addresses addiction and the impact of HIV and AIDS? There you
Rent.
go,
Yep.
John Draper. He got you on that one. Two more. Which Pulitzer Prize winning play follows a woman with terminal cancer, addressing the emotional toll of facing death?
Oh,
I don't know that.
I'll give you a clue. It's been played by Cynthia Nixon from Sex and the City, and Emma Thompson also took on the lead role of Vivian.
ah,
It's called Wit. Wit.
that's a
Last
stumper.
one. Last one. Kevin, I want to look, let's see if you can maintain your dominance over John. He's got a leg up on you. John, think before you answer here. Think, John.
Okay.
Which Broadway play is a dark comedy that addresses addiction, recovery, and relationships in a story centered around an ex-convict trying to stay sober?
Oh, Les Miserables.
I'll give you
No,
a clue.
no.
The lead actors were Chris Rock and Bobby Cannavale with Annabelle Sciorra.
Oh, MFer with a hat. Yes.
MFer with the hat. Thank you, John. I was
Oh,
afraid we're going to
wow.
have to beep that out, Kevin. But
Oh,
actually,
wow, wow,
John
wow,
and I
wow.
saw that together. So great. Man, Kevin's Broadway knowledge is real. What were the four you saw in quick succession, Kevin?
I saw it was called Illinois, based on the music of Sufjan Stevens. Incredible. Get there and see it immediately. I saw Stereophonic. I saw.
We'll see that next week with my daughter in town.
It's great.
I've heard
I saw Hadestown, which is an incredible experience if you have not seen it.
I haven't. I want to see that.
Go and see that one. And then I saw Merrily We Roll Along. I'm a huge Sondheim fan.
Wow.
And that one was incredible. So yeah.
Yeah,
Terrific.
You had time. You went to all the good ones.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We were gonna do it. Yeah.
That's perfect. Yeah.
So tremendous episode. But John, Kevin, that brings us to absolutely true tales of behavioral health link. And I'm going to start with an actual photograph of Denver, Colorado. It was 10 years ago when 12 people died in the movie theater shooting in Aurora, Colorado. Leaders promised mental health system reforms, but established providers fought to maintain the status quo. Highland Park, Uvalde, Buffalo. After mass shootings, the questions are always, why is this tolerated in America? And what must be done to stop it? Stricter gun measures is one answer. But exactly 10 years ago, or just a little bit more from when we first started the engagement, Colorado lawmakers tried to address the problem from a different angle. They directed state money into a plan to create an emergency mental health care crisis system. It was just after midnight that dispatch lines for the Aurora, Colorado Police Department lit up. The unidentified police dispatcher said this: 315 and 314 for a shooting at Century Theaters, 14,300 East Alameda Avenue. They're saying somebody is shooting in the auditorium. After that, Governor John Hickenlooper said this: we really have a duty after tragedies to, look at what we do and how we act, how we help each other. He was Colorado governor, and the state would go on to focus on setting up a toll-free hotline, patient-friendly walk-in clinics, and mobile mental health services. Kevin, they were looking for no wrong door. It was radical stuff at the time, and it was the brainchild of a Colorado Department of Health staffer named Chris Habgood. When Hickenlooper asked for ideas, Habgood happened to be ready. He'd been studying Arizona and Georgia, and he was looking at these exact models. Chris Habgood said at the time, how about this? We've got a report handy right now that the biggest gap in our system is the crisis delivery. What had been an obscure government project suddenly became a signature policy of the governor of Colorado. It was a big deal in the mental health community, and it caught attention. I actually saw that, and I thought this is where the country should be going. This is what people will be looking at, the same kind of headlines, John, that you were asking from Kevin. So we wanted to bring our A-team to it, but we soon got distressing news. We won nearly all of those bids, but we're told that the bid was under investigation by state authorities. The bid was invalidated on a technicality. According to the press, apparently at the behest of Colorado's politically powerful mental health providers. So I landed up in this courtroom, sitting with my attorney, looking at a load of attorneys on the other side. The judge sided with us, saying in court that the state had no good reason to cancel our bid. The judge said this: it just defies reason, and it does suggest a manufactured reason to cancel. It's an incredibly true story, John, but these kinds of innovations have been out there, but they're hard to get going because of the culture change and the differences that Kevin's been talking about
David,
today.
was that all really true?
That was absolutely true, John. And John, you were there too. You were you were a witness in that courtroom. You should have been, John. You should have been a witness in that courtroom.
Yeah, because I was hearing you whining about it all the time.
We definitely did. So, John, that brings us to the plain truth for the day.
Tell it, David.
That model from Colorado was based upon the study of what was happening in Phoenix. And Kevin was already there, had been there when I arrived in Phoenix in 2009. And I was told what he had already learned, that Phoenix had radically shortcut the hospital medical clearance gauntlet that is at the root of our barriers to crisis access across the country. The usual truth for law enforcement is that our communities have put them between a rock and a hard place. Every day, tens of thousands of people with mental health, substance use, and or suicidal crisis land up interfacing with emergency departments and police. The police are faced with three bad options. The first is they face what they call wall time. They're supposed to transport someone to a hospital for assessment and referral, but they get caught. They can spend 4 to 6 hours before they get back to public safety work. They can book the individual into jail. In many communities, that's a much faster process. It's not difficult to charge them with a nuisance or misdemeanor offense. But the police in Phoenix had demanded a different system. They wanted a crisis receiving center that would take drop-offs every time in 5 to 10 minutes. No muss, no fuss, no visit to a hospital first. These emergency behavioral health short-term crisis receiving centers would craft a win-win. Quick access to treatment for the person in crisis, and an easy way for people to get help, and the fastest thing for the police to do. In disbelief, I said, show me. And they said, let's go. Now, I'll jump right to the middle of the action. It's a 15-minute period, and we did the impossible. 2 police drop-offs of a person in mental health crisis and an armed robbery. Now, don't start your stopwatch just yet. Let me set the scene first. Nick Margiata was dressed as a regular police officer, and I was in jeans and a T-shirt. We didn't announce our positions to anyone. Think undercover boss. Over the course of that shift, we interfaced with more than 15 individuals in crisis. Early in the evening, we drove to a local apartment complex, and Nick visited with a friend of his who has schizophrenia, but had been in recovery from heroin and clean for more than 2 years. While we were there, we received a quote-unquote pickup order for a person in crisis in the same location who needed to be transported to the Urgent Psychiatric Center, or the UPC, Kevin. After a brief discussion with that person, she agreed, and we took her to 2nd Street and East Roosevelt. Kevin, was that where you worked?
Yep, that's the place.
So, Kevin, start your stopwatch here in just a second. We park at the rear of the facility immediately next to the police-only access door, and we knock. Someone came to the door, and we immediately were inside a room introducing her to the medical staff and sharing paperwork. There's no line. Then we were simply walking back to Nick's car. So that's the picture. Click the stopwatch. We've just dropped her off in a couple of minutes. It was Starbucks ease of access. Like with the mobile app, it could not have been faster. Now, I'm trying to process the simplicity as we sit into the car, and I hear over the radio the announcement of an armed robbery in process at the Circle K just over a mile away. He jumped into the police cruiser and we took off. My body slammed into the seat from Nick's swift acceleration, and I barely noticed the scenery as my peripheral vision dropped away and my brain focused intently on the narrow view straight ahead of us. It was a pure adrenaline rush. It was very terrifying, and my heart was racing as Nick flipped on the lights and siren, his police car screaming down the street. As we rolled onto the scene as the second car arriving at this armed robbery, we saw another car right there before us was blocking where there were two armed men. We were about 40 yards away in the middle of the street, in the middle of the intersection, and I jumped out as I saw Nick jump out. He yelled at me that I was in the line of fire. Now, thankfully, that situation was resolved in just a couple of minutes, and my heart was still racing, and I looked around to see Nick walking over to a Native American man who had his feet into the street and was intoxicated. He was a little belligerent at first, but Nick began engaging him, asked him if we could get him some help. And before I knew it, we were driving to another crisis facility. The detox center used to be called the Lark, Kevin, just a little bit the other direction. And this time it was even faster. We made the same introduction. We didn't have paperwork this go around. Nick explained that this individual wanted help, asked if we could leave him with the team, and we were off and away. And stop your stopwatch, 15 minutes. We've done the impossible. I think part of the challenge, Kevin, John, is this notion seems like pie in the sky. It seems like a radical departure of the way we do it. And yet Phoenix has been doing this for almost 20 years now. Started in the urgent psychiatric center with value options and is spread across the city, across the state. And we're seeing programs not only in Salt Lake City and Columbus, but around the country. Now, this is outside of our flagship. John, you know that Behavioral Health Link has a sister organization of Recovery Innovations, and this is in the Phoenix, Arizona site back in December when there were 5 police cars outside at the same time. Another case just recently, within the last few weeks, another time that we had 5 different police cars roll up. This is the essence of the no wrong door, Kevin. This can be done, is being done. Recovery Innovations was famous for its living room model and its engagement and connection. But it too deployed this no wrong door approach. Now, we had to bring on the medical and clinical and nursing staffing, and that capacity matters that Kevin talked about. We're now in the process of redesigning and thinking through. We're going to start a capital campaign to look at how we bring in some of the concepts that Kevin has been talking about in a higher form. But John, Kevin, the plain truth is these aren't notions. These are proofs of concept that folks like the University of Utah, Recovery Innovations, Connections of Arizona, Community Bridges, and the Columbus folks, many others are starting to deploy all across the country. And they're this rare win-win-win. It's better for our law enforcement and hospital partners, better for our finances and budgets, and better for the individuals who are in pain to get immediate access to that care and engagement. And John, that's some plain truth for today.
Amen, David. That's some serious plain truth. I used to work on a mobile crisis team, and when we called cops, boy, they hated to be there. And I'll tell you, really hated for them to be there were our clients. And then to sit in a hospital emergency department with an irritated cop for 6 hours and a mental health problem is the worst case scenario. So again, thank you for your plain truth. Kevin, thank you so much for being with us today. And that is it for us today. So please stay cool, stay anchored, and look out for the lifelines that we toss your way next week.